Good morning. I'm so relaxed now. I don't know if I can get through this. I don't know. I just want to sit in the chair and slump. It's been a while since I've stood here at the rostrum. The last time I was here was on a big day. The last time I stood here was the day that my nephew William had his heart transplant. And if you remember, for those of you that were here, I came in the morning. I was the planner and presider that day. I came and I did my welcome message, and then I immediately left to go be with my family. My family may have regretted the fact that I rushed out there and got to spend some time with them in the little waiting room that we got to sit in during the heart transplant surgery. There was this big poster of a heart with all the blood vessels attached. And of course, I stood there and taught them what vessels that were being cut. And, I was showing them all of the ins and outs of, what the procedure was all about. And then every time the nurse or the doctor would come in, they would ask if there was any questions. And of course I had questions. And it got to the point that one of the doctors, I think did he say, "Are you in the business?" And so it's they might have regretted that I was there that day, but I would not have been anywhere else. And that's honestly why sometimes I'm a disaster at hospital visits. I turn into a freak there. I don't know what's wrong with me. But little did I know that day that I stood here on the day of William's heart transplant, next slide, that just a few weeks later, my nephew Winston would be in the same position. Can you imagine 2 heart transplants for both of your sons about 3 weeks apart? That's a lot. That is a lot for my sister to have gone through. But we are luckily, after some ups and downs, and we're still having some issues, but barring any major setbacks, next slide, you can see how good they look today. And you can see my sister, Emily, and both of my nephews, William and Winston, barring any further setbacks, they are finally going to get to go home here in about 3 weeks. So November 3rd is a date that we've, got circled on our calendar. It's a big, big day for them. William, my first nephew, has been in Cincinnati at the hospital since it was June 4th. Yeah. So his whole summer. But I would like to thank you. I wanted to have some pictures of my nephews for you guys to look at. So many of you have been praying for my nephews and for my sister. And I just wanted you to see who you were praying for. And I thank you for all those prayers. I really, truly believe in the power of prayer. And I truly believe that they are feeling and looking as good as they do in those pictures because of the power of prayer. And I also thank the folks that have been sending cards. I'm looking at you, Miss Sharon, from the prayer group. It's special to know that even people that, I don't know that any of you have met my sister Emily, but she knows she has this whole other family that is praying for her and that cares for her. And when she's going through all of that day to day, can you imagine? It's just doctor's visit after doctor's visit. Her whole day is wrapped around, are they feeling okay? Is William's blood glucose okay? Everything is wrapped around how those boys are looking, how they're feeling, how they're doing. And just to know that somebody cares about her is, it's very special. So I thank you for all of that. And I thank you guys for not getting worn out by me every week going, "Can you pray for my nephews?" I don't want to wear out my prayer warriors out there, but I just really appreciate that for those of you that have continued to ask and check and just to see how they're doing. So I thank you, and it means a lot. The way that their journey unfolded, it is so clear to me. God was right there, preparing the way, guiding each step, holding them in his healing embrace. Emily, Winston, and William, they all have a powerful testimony of the power of God's love, what it's like to be in his presence, and just what it is just to be a child of God. I get goosebumps every time I think about their story, just from William's initial fall, who, we have no idea. He was just playing, climbing a ladder, fell down. My sister thought she was just going to the ER to see if he had a concussion or a broken rib, and to find out that he had restrictive cardiomyopathy and it required a heart transplant. So it was a really weird series of events that unfolded. We would never have known until he collapsed and was dead. We would not have known. God was right there, preparing, guiding. It is just, again, I just get goosebumps every time I think about just what a testimony that they have. And obviously, they have a purpose, a plan, and, God has a plan for them because they were so important that he has guided their step and been there every step of the way with them. So it's just, again, it just gives me goosebumps just how all the right things fell into the right place at just the right time. And I gotta say it, God is good all the time. I knew you guys would know what to say. And I don't know about you, but when I hear testimonies of the obvious presence of the Spirit, it gives me goosebumps every time I hear those testimonies. And I have gotten a lot of goosebumps over these last few weeks. Craig, Marilee, Amy, Martin, David, we've all been so blessed to hear your testimonies about how the enduring principles have touched your lives, played out in your lives, and have been expressed within the life of the church. And before I go on, I do want to just take a moment, if we could. Today is the last day of this series, and I would just like to acknowledge Amanda for her leadership in setting up this worship series. She had wanted to talk about the history of the church, and we thought it would be just so interesting to hear the history or pieces of the history of the church through the lens of our enduring principles. So I want to thank and acknowledge Amanda and all of our speakers and all of our planners and the kids for decorating the beautiful, the wonderful covers on the template. Ruth was just talking about the do this, don't do that, those yes and no. Amanda captured it right there on today's, the front of our bulletin. So if we could just take a moment and just acknowledge and thank all that have been a part of this. Can we just take a moment and clap? And for those of you that weren't here during some of those, I just wanted to capture some of the highlights of what the previous messages had been about. So our series started with Craig, dancing with Mother Earth and Father Peace. So he talked about the sacredness of creation and the pursuit of peace, two of our enduring principles. And I really want to thank Craig for he kept it light a little bit, with the Mother Earth and the Father Peace. He kept it a little bit light, but then he did make himself vulnerable and tell us about his concerns, his fears for how we are treating the earth. How much longer can the earth take what we are doing to it? And for reminding us that God wants shalom, peace and wholeness for all of creation. We have been called to protect and be good stewards of creation. The following week, Marilee spoke to us about unity in diversity. And in her message, she reminded us that even when we are having those tough conversations, and the conversation that she talked about was at a USA conference in which the conversation was about ordination of people regardless of their sexual orientation and whether the covenant The sacrament of marriage could be extended to those of the same sex. Hot button topic, very hard thing to talk about, very tough issue. There's people that have strong feelings on both sides. But she reminded us with that unity in diversity that even in the times of these tough conversations, in times of change, in times of transformation, we can have those conversations, those emotionally charged, very difficult issues, but still honor the dignity of all in the room. All voices were heard, and all got a chance, and no one was belittled on either side. So that was a really wonderful reminder. When Amy Mullins spoke about the worth of all persons and all are called, I was so with her. I don't know if you remember, she pulled up a chair and just sat. I really thank her for being so real. Sometimes we don't share. Sometimes we put on that happy-go-lucky face. We come into the service, people ask how you are, and you just say you're fine. But she pulled up a chair, she sat, she slumped, and I could feel the weight of those yeses that she talked about. She talked about how she was a yes person. She had a hard time saying no. Do you want to do this? Yes. Do you want to do this? Yes. Do you want to do this? Yes. Being a yes person, I know we're called to help. I know we're called to be there. I know we're called there to support others, but it doesn't always have to be you, and it comes at a cost if you always say yes. There's a cost to your wholeness, to your relationships, your worth. There's also a cost to others, that all are called. By you saying yes to everything, you could be denying somebody else the opportunity to have said that yes. So I really thank her for being so real and just showing us the weight of those yeses. And Martin, you're next. Yes, he flaunted that he gets to walk Luna and we don't get to. But he also reminded us is that grace is seeing others as Christ sees them. It's not about us. It's not about our comfort. That if we are truly living a grace-filled life, we open ourselves and let Christ's vision work in us and through us, and we express his ministry as a member of the body of Christ. David was last week, and he talked about continuing revelation. And I thank you for reminding us the statement that I know you said a lot, and I'm not saying that you spoke too long or anything, but what really struck me and what I really picked up on is that you reminded us that God loves us as we are and who we are, but he loves us too much to leave us as is. He always wants the best for us, and he's always going to be pushing us for his plan, for what is always better than what we can choose for ourselves. And that if we listen closely, God continues to reveal his plans for us in all aspects of our lives, whether it be our professional life, whether it be in our ministry, with our family. We need to listen. God continues to reveal himself. Today, we will conclude the series with responsible choices. And so the symbol for responsible choices is right here. And I will admit, when I was first looking at the symbol for this, I was not impressed with this symbol. It's green. It kind of looked like the recycling symbol. And when you have that symbol there that looks like something that's on 10,000 objects at your house, it's easy to just dismiss it. It's easy to just look right past it. But as I sat with this material, as I sat and really thought about the responsible choices, the symbol came to grow on me. The arrow showing that our actions have consequences. There is, and it's a continuous thing. So, there is no choice that we make in a bubble. Our actions always have some sort of effect on someone else or something else. That there are things. I was joking with Martin the other day. So here I talked about these powerful testimonies that I've heard throughout the weeks. And I was joking with him that they got to talk about the cool enduring principles, those touchy-feely ones, those feel-good ones, blessings of community, grace and generosity. And then comes along Amy, make responsible choices. But, I don't want to be the Debbie Downer, but Amanda knows me very, very well. Responsible choices is my jam. She knows me, this was mine. Even before she even conceived this series, responsible choices was mine. Because I'm always excited by responsible choices. I choose to live or try to live as a responsible life as I can. I really do think about what I say, what I do, probably too much, because this girl has a plan B, C, D, E, and F. Should plan A fail? I'm thinking about all those things that could happen, because I'm a responsible girl. I like to have everything mapped out. But responsible choices, I know that sounds like, be responsible, but how exciting is it that we have a God that loves us so much, he gives us the agency to make our own choices. He has the power to make us do whatever he wants us to do, but that's not what he wants. Instead, he meets us where we are. He prepares the way for us. He will walk the path with us, but he lets us choose whether or not to cross the finish line. And I really appreciate that these enduring principles are guidelines. They are not rules, because we know what happens with rules. If you tell me I have to do something, you just threw the gauntlet, and I'm going to ask why. Prove it. Tell me why I have to do this. Tell me why I have to do that. If you tell me I have to do something, you're going to have to support why. If you tell me I can't do something, that entrenches me even more. I took private lessons. I play the flute, and I took private lessons in my younger days from 5th grade all the way to the day that I graduated. And my flute teacher knew me so well. All she would have to do is put a piece of music in front of me and go, Amy, I think this one's too hard. I don't think you'll be able to do this. Yeah, she knew how to play me. You tell me I can't do something, I'm going to show you up, even if I wanted to do it or not. We even see examples of this in the Bible when God gave us some rules in Genesis, right there at the beginning of the Bible, right? There's Adam, there's Eve. He gave them one rule. You can do whatever you want in this Garden of Eden. But what did he tell them? There's one tree. Do not eat the fruit from that one tree. And you know what they did. They ate right there from that tree of knowledge. And it was for their protection. It was because out of love that he gave them that one rule. But he also gave them the free agency to choose whether or not to listen. In Deuteronomy, this one's, even Moses shares the 10 Commandments with the Israelites. How amazing is that they get this direct connection. God spoke to Moses and gave them these rules that were written out of love. He knows that if we murder somebody, if we adulter, if we lie, that hurts us. It's not good for us. It hurts our soul. It hurts our relationship with others. It hurts our relationship with God. He gave us these rules to protect us. But no sooner did Moses go up that mountain again, what happened? They broke those rules, right? They even made that golden calf. They broke every single rule, lickety split. When God knows, when he gives us rules, he made us. He knows us well enough to know our backs go up and we will break them. And if we aren't breaking the rules, we might tweak those rules just a little bit to fit how we want them to be. How many extra rules did the Pharisees and the Sadducees create to describe what people could and could not do on the Sabbath? That was not from God. All those extra rules of what if something falls, you can't even pick it up. That's work. Those rules were not from God. Those rules were impossible to follow. They were used to elevate themselves, the Pharisees and the Sadducees, above the others and to oppress the commoners. And Jesus called him out on it. He's like, those are not of God. And he broke those rules very publicly and very blatantly. So God gives us the agency to follow him or not. He gives us this free will. He gives us the agency to trust and obey or not. And for those of us that do say yes, that have said yes, and choose to say yes each and every day, because that is a choice that we have to make each and every day, as disciples of Christ, as members of Community Christ, we are called to make responsible choices. So let's take a look at what that means. So let's first dig a little bit deeper into that word choice. It feels so much safer than that word responsible. Responsible is kind of a scary word. Little did Ruth know when she was up here saying that we don't know how many choices that we make in a day. I got you covered. As Ruth mentioned, life is filled with them. From the moment we wake up to the moment we go to bed at night, our day is filled with choices. In fact, research says that the average adult makes 35,000 choices a day. 35,000. What gave me a chuckle, though, when I was digging into the numbers, there was a study from Cornell that said 226.7 of those choices are on food alone. So we can kind of maybe see what's important to us in our day-to-day life. So if we break down that number, 35,000 choices in a day, so let's say the average person sleeps between 6 to 8 hours a day. That would mean we roughly make 2,000 choices every hour, or it's one choice every 2 seconds. It's a lot. But when you think about your day-to-day life, it doesn't seem that unreasonable to me. But for those of you that know me, as I said, I'm one of those sticklers. You can't just tell me something and let me take it on fact. I'm going to make you prove it. So I dug a little bit deeper, and I can tell you why. So I teach a gen ed science course, and we talk about what is science, what's not science, how science is done, and how to evaluate claims as to whether they're true or not, which is a very useful class these days. There's a lot of stuff out there that we need to evaluate to see if that claim is trustworthy or not. Every term, I ask my students, what do you think it takes to be a scientist? Anybody want to guess what their answer is? Got to get a degree. Any other thoughts? Kind of along that, PJ, is they say you have to be smart. Which, I guess being smart doesn't hurt, but it's not the right answer. Yes, Martin. I wish I had candy to throw out or something. Or carrots. Carrots. It's a responsible choice. Carrots. No. So every term they tell me you have to be smart. And again, it's like, I guess that helps if you think that smart means that you can gather in lots of information and evaluate it. It depends on what your definition of smart is. But what I tell them, what it really takes to be a scientist, and I advocate that it's for all humans, is that you need a skeptical attitude, that if someone makes a claim, you don't just accept it. You need to be a critical thinker, which means that you have the ability to break down a claim, look at all the pieces, see if their conclusion makes sense, see if you can synthesize it exactly the same way that they did. And you also have to have a curious nature, asking why. I hate that is the one thing, I know sometimes it's annoying when your kids are like, why? But I hate that we drill that out of our kids. Like that is, we should keep people asking why? A curious nature is very, very important. So anyway, I practice what I preach. As a good scientist, I did not take that 35,000 number for fact. I had to go do some digging, and so I tracked down the original source of the claim. That took me probably 3 days to find that. And I don't know why it was so important to me, but it really was. I had to find it. The references were circular. Papers were citing each other, so I couldn't follow the paper trail to figure out where the original reference came from. But I finally found it. The author was a Nobel laureate in psychology, so I guess it's, Nobel laureate. They got a Nobel Prize. I guess I can accept that. Maybe he knows what he's doing. So I guess it was a trustworthy source. And so he had calculated this using equations from a branch of math that is not my forte. It's called combinatorics. He threw in a little bit of binomials for those yes, no, up, down, right, left for those two-pronged answers, and some principles from the fundamental counting principle. I was going to show you the calculation. It would have taken about 10 PowerPoint slides, depending on the font, 10 to 15, to show you this. But the calculation is not what was important. What was important, the key to this study, was the way the author defined the word choice. You would think that we know what a choice is. There's a lot of ways to look at it. So the way that he came up with this number, and did all of his math and all of that, he came up with that roughly 35,000 choices in a day because of the way that he defined the word choice. There were other studies that followed, and their numbers were a little bit higher. Some of the studies were a little bit lower. And it was not that they used different math. It's not that they used a different formula, a different calculation. It was in their definition of choice. And I have to tell you, I have never laughed so hard reading a discussion section of a peer-reviewed scientific paper. But, and you're like, only Amy could laugh, have like a good time like reading a paper. But the discussion sections for these, when they were determining what choice was, it was hilarious. So one of the discussion points that one of them lifted was that if you have something tickling your nose, was the fact that you picked your nose a choice, or was it just a reflex because you found something tickling your nose? Never would I have thought I would see nose picking in a peer-reviewed scientific journal. Some of them were if you are sitting in front of TV and you choose to have like potato chips or crackers or whatever, is that mindless eating that follows, is that a choice? Or is it just reflex? When you're walking down the hallway and you stop, you start, you turn right, you turn left, but you don't even really think about what you're doing, or when you're driving, does anybody else, maybe it's scary, but sometimes I come to and I'm like, how did I get here? I don't remember all those other steps in between. I just don't remember it. So are those choices that we made when we stopped, when we did all the right things, we made all the right actions, were those choices or were those just reflexes? So that's where the different numbers came from. So if you can imagine there's this much debate about what a choice is, can you imagine when you slap that word responsible in front of it? The conversation just got harder. When you put the word responsible in front of it, responsible, there is no one size fits all. This is what is responsible, this is what not. I mean, how easy would life be if we knew if you do X, Y, and Z, you're responsible. If you don't, you're irresponsible. That would make life so easy. When as soon as you bring in the word responsible, we need to think ethics, morality, your personal upbringing, tradition. There's so many things that factor into what a responsible choice is for you versus someone else. My point here is that words carry meaning. There's a lot of debate about choice. Then you slap in this idea of responsible. Words carry meaning. The fundamental way that we use certain terms comes down to our personal understanding of the word, how we have experienced that word, and how we personally define it. My understanding may not be the same as your understanding. We can use the exact same words, but might not be speaking the same language. And this is exactly what happened, that the situation that led to the development of the enduring principles as a whole. It's an interesting story. So I will argue, and I will support it because I'm a scientist. I'm going to break it down and give you the facts and all of that so that you can choose whether or not to accept my claim. But I will argue that the enduring principles were born out of a responsible choice. So the story of where the enduring principles came from, David mentioned it last week, is there was a podcast that interview where Carla Long interviewed Steve Veazey. And they were talking about the enduring principles. And Steve Veazey shared that sometime after he was ordained as the president of the church wanted to seek ways to bring together a more culturally diverse group of leaders to discuss and try to make sense of direction about important issues facing the church. Mary Lee talked about the issue of ordination and marriage of people with different sexual orientations. This particular group that had been brought together, it was about 75 to 80 people from around the world. They initially came together to wrestle with issues such as sexual ethics and sexual orientation with regards to church membership, baptism, and confirmation. So a real easy discussion, right? Those were very real, very complex issues. People were very passionate, very emotional, and what people were looking for were statements from the church that would encompass the perspectives of our very diverse membership. And it was during the course of these discussions that they discovered they weren't speaking the same language. Not because they were from different countries and literally possibly speaking a different language, but because the words and the phrases that people were using were being used in a different context. It meant different things to different people, and it created a lot of confusion. Those discussions started to go nowhere. But consistent with Doctrine and Covenants 162:6b, which states, a prophetic people must work tirelessly to tear down the walls of separation and to build bridges of understanding. The group did not give up on the process. So they made the responsible choice to pause those discussions. They were going nowhere. And what they decided to do instead was to build bridges of understanding. The presidency began to lead a process with this same group to explore and define what it is that is most foundational, the most enduring in terms of who we are as a community of Christ and how we understand our identity and calling in the world. In other words, what is our common language? The process ended up lasting almost 2 years, which many in-depth discussions happened, many deep dives into the scriptures, many hours in prayer. The group finally came to consensus around statements that are now called the enduring principles. Are they perfect? Probably not. These were developed 2000. Those discussions began like around 2008, 2009, so our enduring principles are about 10 years old. The world has changed. We have changed. Are they perfect? I feel like they still encompass who we are, but perhaps some of the language might need to be updated. Doctrine and Covenants 162:1e states, the spirit of the restoration is not locked into one moment in time, but instead it is the call of every generation to witness the essential truths in its own language and form. Let the Spirit breathe. So perhaps Some of the language with our enduring principles needs to be updated. Perhaps a new generation will be called to let the Spirit breathe new life into some of the language, some of the terminology, some of the understandings for what is in our enduring principles, for those things that had not been yet revealed since they're about 10 years old, these enduring principles. So we know things today that we wouldn't have known then. Was anything left out? Perhaps. Steve Easy mentioned that he had held on to the idea of perhaps an enduring principle of wholeness should be explored. Wholeness is a part of, it's an underlying theme through the enduring principles, but perhaps it needs to be set aside as its own. Carla Long, who was the interviewer, she mentioned that perhaps we should explore the idea of trust in vulnerability. That was an interesting one to me. I mean, I think that is what I love about, when we hear the different speakers speak and we hear their testimonies, that we have to trust one another and make ourselves vulnerable. And we have to trust God and make ourselves vulnerable to God to hear the still small voice from the Spirit, to understand where He is leading us. So trust and vulnerability is an important one. And then, of course, I'm that annoying person. I was like, well, I think maybe something was left out. And it maybe comes from my schooling. It's like when you have a mission and mission initiatives and core values, they should all align. And I'm looking over here, we have develop disciples to serve. Sorry, had to look at how it was worded, as a mission initiative. And, we say all are called, but there is nothing in there about learning, lifelong learning in there, preparation. I'm wondering if maybe there isn't something there, that maybe an enduring principle of lifelong learning, spiritual practice, there could be something there, but there are way more learned people than me. And I know I've talked a long time about these enduring principles, and I thank you for enduring that. Dun-dun-dun, dad joke. But the enduring principles are near and dear to my heart. They are the reason I joined this church. I visited a lot of churches. Many have similar missions to ours. Many have nice, welcoming people. So, what sets us apart? There is something different here, though. I think it might stem from the fact that the church took that time to pause and to reflect on exactly who we are and who we want to be. That they took that time to look at the very core values that defines the essence, the very heart and soul of the community of Christ. So this brings me back to a question I asked, a question of what is a responsible choice? While many of the 35,000 daily choices are pretty routine, some can be life-changing. We are who we are because of our choices. We are where we are because of our choices. There are consequences to our choices. Our choices can contribute to the good or the evil of the world. So how do we make a responsible choice? And where should we look first? What do the scriptures do? We seek God first. A responsible choice should be one made out of prayer. Proverbs 3, verses 5 and 6 say, trust in the Lord with all your heart and lean not on your own understanding. In all your ways acknowledge Him, and He shall direct your paths. So if you have a big decision, especially a decision that's going to impact not only you, but others and on down the line, it's important to spend that extra time in prayer. We should lean heavily upon the Lord, surrender our will to His, and listen for that still small voice. And I would also like to advocate, I'm going to put this, yes, we should go to the Lord first, but we should also lean into these other values. Listen to the Lord, follow His direction, but talk to other people. Evaluate whether or not your choice upholds the sacredness of creation. Does it seek to pursue peace? Does it seek unity in diversity? Does it uphold the worth of all persons? Does it ensure that all are given the opportunity to serve? Is it based in grace and generosity? Do they seek the blessings of community? Are they based in continuing revelation from God? For those big decisions, take the time and the effort to reach out to God, listen in prayer, but also think about whether or not your choice could impact others in a way that might diminish their worth, that might be harmful to the earth, that may sow seeds of discord, reduce peace. We should think about those consequences. So I don't know if I'm painting a picture. I am very slow to make choices, to decisions, because I can be trapped in that paralysis of analysis. It takes me a long time, but I need to work through things. I need to get on my knees in prayer. And I really do try to think about those downstream impacts. And last but not least, by putting that responsible choice there in front of the cross, what I would ask is, if you are still unsure whether or not your choice is responsible, is ask yourself, is it Christ-like? Colossians 3:17 says, whatever you do in word or deed, do everything in the name of the Lord Jesus, giving thanks to God the Father through him. If they can't see Jesus through your actions, if whoever you're working with, just like that song we played earlier, do you see Jesus in me? If they can't see Jesus, it may not be a responsible choice. You might want to think about that. In closing, I have a call to action. I will finally shut up. And again, not to talk about work too much, but we at work, we have a performance review process, and I know everybody has it. Ours is every 6 months. It's ridiculous how often we have to go through performance. But at my work, we have 9 competencies that we need to show growth and work in and all of that. And as a part of our review process, we have to pick 1 or 2 of our 9 competencies, and then we're going to pay special attention to that in the next review period. So I have 9 competencies at work. We have 9 enduring principles. So my call to action to you is that as we listen to our meditation song, that song that we have a different version of the song that we have been singing, the Sing a New World into Being, I ask that you think about 1 or 2 of those enduring principles that you will pay special attention to over the next 6 months, year, whatever the time frame that you want to do it, whatever time period works for you. Choose 2 that you're really going to focus on and pray on, and maybe see how you can increase your ministry in those areas. Imagine the impact it could have on your ministry. Again, studies show that you will make 35,000 choices today. Many are routine, some can be life-changing. Which bucket this choice falls into, whether it's routine, it goes nowhere, or it's life-changing in your ministry, that choice is up to you. Choose responsibly.